Hello, everybody. My name is Elle, and thank you so much for tuning in to my podcast called A Quiet Voice, where I talk about the thoughts and opinions that run through my mind as an introverted Gen Z. Today, on this episode, I'm actually going to talk about college debt. And I'm sure this is a topic of which many people can relate to, as it seems that in today's society, if you want to get a career which would actually provide you lots of growth and high earning potential, then going to college or university seems to be a requirement for all of them. Or at least that's what we're told. And in this episode, I'm going to discuss what it means to be in college debt today, but also how I managed to pay off my own college debt after graduating 22 months before. If you could all just find a warm drink, a comfortable place to sit, and relax as I take you on to a journey into my mind. Okay, so the topic of college debt. It seems like today everybody thinks that you have to go to college or else you won't amount to anything or be able to live any sort of decent life. Forget about those careers which don't require any further education, and especially forget those careers of which you could do by getting an apprenticeship or some sort of trades training. No, we're told that we need to go to a college or university that will last 4 years if you don't require a master's or PhD, and then that would make everything worth it. It would make the years of debt worth it, because once you graduate, you'll be able to start making loads of money as soon as you do get handed that piece of paper. But of course, many of us have figured out at this point that that is not the case. It used to be relatively true, but those days seem to be long behind us, and that was before the pandemic, let alone after, when businesses are closing and shutting down left and right, contracting the amount of jobs that are available, which was already not enough considering the amount of supply there was for those jobs in those fields. But now, for the past generation, we've all just been staring at the massive amount of debt. That is the result of our college education, of which we're told that that's okay, this is good debt. This is what is viewed as being good debt, because it's not like you went out and bought some expensive toy like a sports car or decided to go and buy yourself some new jewelry. No, you decided to invest in your future. This debt is going to end up allowing you to make more money in the future, so everything's going to be okay, right? Well, for a lot of people, we found out that that is not actually the case, and that piece of paper, which is the most expensive paper that we will ever buy, that expensive paper is still, at the end of the day, just a piece of paper. But it was expensive paper. This paper cost $20, $30, $40, for some people $50,000 and up. And now we're wondering, what are we going to do now? As the phone starts to ring, because it's time for you to start paying because you've graduated. Therefore, you must have a job, right? And the answer in most cases is no, because it's completely normal pre-pandemic for you to 6 months post your graduation and still be no job and still be jobless or working the same job you were working when you were still in school. So what are you supposed to do about that? And how's the next generation supposed to make up for that or learn from our mistakes? Well, I'm actually that next generation as being a Gen Z, and already heard all of the horror stories that tons of millennials have been telling us over the past 10 years. Yes, it's one expensive piece of paper. Have I started using my piece of paper yet? No. I actually have two expensive pieces of paper, and so far it's not been carrying me very far, although those last 8 months with that expensive piece of paper is what it took me in order to pay off my $25,000 worth of student loan debt. I managed to pay off $25,000 22 months after I graduated. Took a little bit longer than I wanted it to, but at least I remained true to the resolution I made back in high school, of which, when I was in my final year of high school, they sat us into an assembly and told us the different ways we could pursue our education after graduation. And of course, they told us about university and college, which in Canada are actually two separate types of post-secondary education. They are not the same. What we call a university is what the US or other countries would think of when they say post-secondary education. It's going to a much larger and expensive education institution, of which you will be learning most of your new facts and information from textbooks and teachers telling you said information. And then there are colleges which are ranked lower in the education hierarchy, of which it is a combination of textbooks, teachers telling you what the facts are, and then hands-on training, of which applies those facts of which you were then told. They also mention apprenticeships into one of the possibilities that we could choose to pursue after graduation. But of course it always does get overlooked because nobody wants to take an apprenticeship, because that gets viewed as being below the other two and with a lower earning potential. Let alone that actually isn't the case, but it's just not looked at as being as favorable, as that would lead to most likely a blue-collar job instead of a white-collar job. It was during that assembly about talking about what comes after high school, of which the spokesperson, who I don't remember who that person was or what exactly their point was to make them so original, but of which they asked the teachers to tell us how long it's been since they've managed to pay off the student loans. And I remember one teacher of which was, and she announced in a proud voice that she had just paid off her student loans last month. And it's just like, I was just surprised, disappointed, and then told myself I was definitely not going to take that long to pay off my student loans. I do not believe that a student loan should be like a mortgage. But that seems to be how it's formatted. At least here in Ontario, we have, a better avenue than what I hear about in the States, of which most of our student loans are government loans, which means that they do offer a lower interest rate than those that are handed out by a private institution. And not all of the money of which the government gives us is actually expected to be, paid back upon completion of education. Our OSAP loans are comprised of an actual loan, of which some of it comes from the federal government, some comes from our provincial government, so the government of Ontario, and then the remainder is actually a bursary of which we don't have to worry about paying back. When hearing the horror stories from the States, I was very grateful for the loan options we had. But upon graduation, I still logged into my loan account and found out I had totaled $25,000. And then I was just like, why? But I was not completely devastated, as I knew that I could still pay off my loan. Why? Because $25,000 is a lot of money, so what made me so sure that I was going to pay this off any faster than my high school teachers? And the thing was that I had actually been very frugal with my money during school. The biggest thing being that I chose to not move out when I started university. I remained home. I chose a school of which I could commute to via public transit, not even by driving, as I considered that to be too expensive to even bother with. And I hear that was actually pretty common. A lot of people in my generation had decided to hold off on getting their license, or at least using their license, because it costs too much money to be a car owner who actually uses the car. So make do with taking public transit or Uber, as it has increased the options and convenience of people who do not drive. So I saved money on rent by not having to get my own place or even have to splurge for a college dorm. I saved on transportation since my bus pass only cost me about $115 each month. So that was a fixed amount. I got a monthly pass, so it was always the same amount each month. I also learned how to cook, and I buy my own groceries, so I had to buy my own food. I didn't waste money on takeout or unexpected splurges like going out to a restaurant, of which over time that also cost you money. I worked during university. From years 2 through 4, I was working part-time, of which I saved any money of which I did not spend. And lastly, I saved all of my excess money from my income tax filings. When you're a student in university, that basically guarantees you for a tax refund, or at least here it does. The amount may not always be great, and of course that depends on where you file and what your actual tax situation is. But in most cases, you'll be getting a tax refund because of your tuition, and that pretty much balances out anything else that could be showing up in your report. So when you get a tax refund, save it. And that will go right along with any of the extra loan money that you have. So with my loan, I decided to check off the box that said have the government pay your financial institution your tuition costs, and then they would just deposit the remainder of your loan into your bank account. And then that was the final best thing that I did. I had the money into my account, and I left it there. I lived on my part-time salary, being frugal, buying the necessities and leaving only a little bit extra for the wants and pretty much everything that I bought on Amazon, because I buy everything on Amazon. Had to make sure that I get the most out of my Amazon Prime membership, and it's not just for buying textbooks, which is actually another tip that saved me a lot of money. Buying my textbooks on Amazon and not at the university bookstore. Pretty much I could get all of my textbooks for half the price it would have been if I bought it from the school. So by me taking these measures and over the span of 4 years, by the time I graduated, I had into my school savings account over $11,000. Money of which I then put towards my student loan about 2 months after I graduated, when I realized, oh right, with the new government, of which I found out with the new conservative government, I'm actually starting to be charged some interest on my student loans, over $3 a day, I believe. And then I said nope, and then I paid $1,000 each day, because it seems like that was my limit, until I had emptied out my savings account, and at which time the interest was cut in half. From that point forward, I made sure that I needed to make paying off that loan a priority, which means that instead of putting all of that money into my savings account, of which I still had some extra still working part-time, that would instead go to my student loan. In Ontario, we have a 6-month period after graduation of which you are not expected to start make payments onto your loan. This used to be a tax-free or interest-free period, but with the new government turned it into a partial tax period. So we didn't get charged the full tax from both loans, but we ended up having to pay, I believe, the provincial interest during this time period. So I made it my mission to put anything aside onto the student loan. And I did have other bank accounts with money saved up from work, of which I had a separate saving purpose for, and I did start to put a couple $1,000s from that down as well. But the biggest thing was when I did finally manage to get that job from the bank call center, of which it paid me for the first time of full-time income. In the span of 8 months, I made the most out of that, and I was able to pay off my student loan about a month before I quit. When you were before making your payments to your student loan on time and going over on a part-time salary, when you finally get a full-time salary, that basically means you can put the difference completely onto your loan. So yes, you can pay off thousands of dollars in just a couple of months. As long as you don't change how you're living and continue to live as if you were still a college student, you can pay off your student loans, thus leaving your options open just in case that expensive piece of paper does not pay off. Student loan debt is one of the few, well, the only type of debt that I know of which still stays with you even when declaring bankruptcy. With that being the case, you want to make sure that you wipe out that debt as soon as possible, because even your good debts could end up ruining you further down the road. And I suggest making your priorities known to yourself real soon before you end up into a black hole of which you don't know how to get out from. For me, seeing that I was being charged over $3 a day is what got me paying it off early before my 6-month hiatus. I, for one, don't believe that I should have to pay more money than what I borrowed. Of course, I understand why interest rates exist and the reason for them and how that makes the banks and these other financial institutions loaning out money to be worthwhile for them as they need to make a profit on it. But I believe that I will pay back any money of which I take, and I now need to pay it back as soon as possible because of interest. I don't want to have to pay back more than what I took. And I think if more people took this to heart, then we wouldn't have as big of a student loan problem as we do here in both Canada and the States. Especially in Canada, since we do have more governmental programs to aid us. And I look and see even from people who go and take their student loan money and then spend it on non-essentials. Even my own sister decided to take her student loan money and spend it on things like clothes, name brand clothing and shoes and the likes, when it's really not necessary. I'm done paying off my student loans before I even got the use out of my education. But I know at least by not having that debt, my window was completely free. I was able to quit my job because I have no outstanding loans to my name. And I lived a very frugal and affordable lifestyle, so I could go on for an extended amount of time before I would really need an income. Because I saved my money and I appreciated what it was worth. But not everybody can be happy living a similar lifestyle to which I am. Me being an introvert did aid me on that in the sense that I didn't feel left out by not going out and hanging out with friends, going to the movies or eating out or going to a club. I didn't feel like I was missing out on any of those. Not everybody is okay with that, and extroverts may feel like that is something that just isn't doable for them, at least not for a long-term sort of situation. Then the pandemic happened, so they're probably living that similar lifestyle regardless. Which, at least one thing, they should be spending less money now than they were before. But a piece of advice for those who are still in school or about to start the post-secondary education. Other than, of course, the obvious being think about your major wisely and what school you're going to attend. Calculate what 4 years attending that institution is going to cost you, and then look at the possible careers of which you could get with that degree. And then look at the demand for that degree, because if the demand is not there, then it may not be worth it. But if you have done all of your research and you have decided that yes, it is worth it, then I suggest you don't start spending your loan money as soon as you get it, other than paying down your tuition. Pay off as much as you can. The money you have left over, you either save that money into a savings account so that you can't accidentally spend it, and then when the time comes to start paying off your loan, you will begin immediately. But if you don't trust yourself to not touch the money into your savings account, then start paying off the loan before you graduate. We often believe that we have to wait until after we're completed using our loan in order to start paying it down. Perhaps we should be thinking about this loan more like a credit card, just like how you would spend something on your credit card, but you may make a payment on it before you even get your bill at the end of the month. Well, at least you should be doing that. And next thing going on is all of the horror stories of which I hear people running up their credit card bills when they first get one once they start school. And of which, for that, I say use your credit card as if it's your debit card. Being, if you don't have this money into the bank, then don't spend it. I got a credit card in my 3rd year of university, of which I am so happy for, and I use it for everything. So much so that I canceled my other credit cards because this was the card that got me the most amount of rewards. And that's another thing of which I feel like a credit card should do more for me than just give me access to credit. I expect some sort of reward system to make it worth my while to choose that credit card instead of another, or to just use my debit card, because you don't have to use a credit card for everything in order to build up your credit. But I found one that was worth it, of which I could just use as if it was my debit card, charge my bills to it, and have all of my expenses connected to this card, so that at the end of the month I only made one lump sum bill payment to my credit card, and that would be all. And by doing this, I could build up over $200 worth of rewards by the end of the year, without having to do anything extra or spend out of the ordinary. It certainly beats any cashback card of which offers you 1% cashback. It was much better than my other credit card of which gave me 1% cashback. Spend $100, get $1 back. Definitely not worth it. This podcast is best for those who are just going to be starting the post-secondary education now, because that's when they'll be able to make the most difference to it. If you start thinking about your loan from year 1, then by the time year 4 rolls around, you will have a solid plan, be able to make a big dent out of your student loan before you even start your job hunting. And then once you do manage to get a full-time job, as it may or may not be the job which you went to school for, you will live as if you were still a college student. And you will pay down that loan, and once that loan is gone, then you could do whatever you wanted. You can go and decide to go to school for something else, get a diploma instead, or an online certificate of which costs much less. Or you could decide to freelance or go into some sort of trade education Find whatever works for you, because it seems that now the only way to ensure that you will live a profitable and fulfilling life is if you are willing to take the risk to branch out to something unknown before and put your full dedication towards it. Success doesn't come easy, but it's definitely worth taking the risk to find out. So, thank you so much for listening to another episode of my podcast, and I hope you'll tune in again in order to hear about the thoughts that went through my mind.